Wow. Once again, Big Bad Builders, the time is running out, and welcome to Cladding Matters. Of course, as ever, I'm with my faithful co-host, Hamish McClay of Searching and Play, Steve Day, Building Safety Senior.org, currently holed up in Royal Artillery Quays. More about that later. And our special guest today, Rob Munns, who is Business Development Director of BFT Mars Climbers, which is an absolutely genius alternative to scaffolding, but we'll get to that. Hamish, would you care to introduce the topic and take us away?
Yeah, well, perhaps we should have a line in our song about big bad scaffolders as well as big bad builders. A brief introduction sort of here, because it's great having Rob here as an expert, because I admire so much this particular, and the annoying thing is it's not a new method.
No.
It's been around, and Rob's one of the ones that enlightened us on the fact it's been around for nearly 30 years. However, we ought to just refer back to the situation we currently find ourselves in. As a consequence of Greenwich Council, at this particular moment in time we speak, they irresponsibly stated that there were no defects within the builders regarding building regulations when the properties were built. So currently Royal Artillery Quays, and there's just I can't remember, it's 1 or 2 towers at the moment. Steve will actually show us about it. As a consequence of which they're going through the throes of remediation. Now, remediation for what, one might ask, because there is irrefutable proof that, in fact, there was serious breaches, several serious breaches, of which Greenwich Council have been made aware, and they have denied any breaches whatsoever. And they're sticking by that. So even while Steve and his, they remain with the residents having to sort of put up with, we can actually see we'll see behind Rob when he speaks, the difference between the two different types of scaffolding solutions that can be used. There's the skeletal sort of type of scaffolding and the monstrous side that unfortunately the people in Royal Artillery Quays are having to sort of tolerate at the moment. But after all of this time, with the heat waves, whether there's heat waves, whether there's fresh or anything like that or not, at the end of the 2-year period that it's taking, and a good part of that, 3 to 6 months of that, is putting up the darn scaffolding in the first place. So there's all sorts of things. So this particular council have damned the residents in there, because after all this time, after all this inconvenience of all this remediation, they're still going to end up paying exactly the same amount of money for the insurance. And in fact, it may even be more for further remediation later on, sort of down the road. But let the others get going, because I can go on for ages about all of them.
Well, we'll clamber Hamish down from his orange box and bring onto the stage Steve. Welcome back to the show. So talk us through this.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, we're still in a big fight with Greenwich Council. So Greenwich Council, despite being sent all the evidence of building regulation breaches at the time of construction, including missing fire doors at the base of each fire staircase, egregious external wall, plastic fixings and so on, and even internal defects where the reports say they're so dangerous prosecutions are recommended because they breached the building regulations on fire compartmentation. And the council says none of this evidence exists as their official council position. They held for a whole year now.
Nothing to see here, isn't it?
Yeah. And the problem is we're going through a 2-year remediation with scaffolding up, with all our windows and our doors locked down. And we're only getting a partial remediation because they want to leave the internals half done. They want to leave highly combustible, second most combustible material in Europe on our fire shafts, 16-story single escape stairs. There's 8 towers as well, so there's a lot of people, 1,000 people here. And they want to, very questionable on these missing fire doors at the base of the 8 fire shafts, 1 per tower. So we're in a terrible situation where we're enduring the heat of the summer at the moment, or the spring even. with our doors locked, our windows shut, unable to open them because they're actually stuck to the fastened to the walls outside, so we can't open them. And having a partial remediation after 2 years of enduring that, not having a full, which means we're condemned to permanently high insurance and dangerous buildings still. And that's due to the watered down PAS 9980 standard, which I'm pleased to say we will be dealing with in the remediation bill. But yeah, it's an appalling situation.
Can I ask you, because I'm going to come on to Rob shortly, how tall, what are the dimension, how many stories?
Well, there's 16 stories.
16 stories. And how long did it take roughly for the scaffolding to go up?
It took about 3 months to go up, and yeah, it takes. I mean, it's a lot of work because it's right by the river. They have to put up, special netting. I think you can see that on Rob's background. You know, the building on the left is very.
We're going to have a look in a minute because I want to talk about mast climbers because they are such an amazing alternative to this. It just blows my mind why this wasn't considered in the first place. But 3 months to put up, you can't open your windows because the scaffolding is there all the time.
Yeah, they've got, and especially at my floor level, they've got a lot of heavy machinery on the scaffolding, and they've got, they've just got tons of metal and all the materials all over the scaffolding, and it's just an absolute nightmare. So they
you're stuck behind a plastic sarcophagus. You are constantly.
We've got balconies as well, Gareth. We could go out on our balconies, but because of all the scaffolding and all the stuff they're leaving on the scaffolding, like the drills and there's all this dangerous material, machines, and you've got wires and all kinds of stuff going to generators down the bottom. So, and you've got 3 lifts going up all the materials, and they just will not allow us under those conditions to go on. It
sounds like a bloody nightmare. It really does. Okay, well, I think it's high time we bring Rob on. Rob, welcome to the show. Now look, the first question I've got to ask you. Let's talk about this directly. We've got a 17-story building. You've been around this many times. We'll talk about mast climbing in general. How long would it take to put up mast climbers on a building like that?
On a building like that, per elevation, so per position, if you like, on the mast climber, you'd be looking at install to full height in 3 days. So scaffolding equivalent per position would be about 25 days. So yeah, you start multiplying that round a block, hence you get to what Steve's figure is, kind of 3 months for scaffolding, whereas probably the equivalent in mast climbers would be probably less than 1 month, depending on how many positions were going around that block. So a significant difference.
And of course, you wouldn't need the shrouding. You wouldn't need all that nonsense. And each mast climber acts entirely independently of the next one, doesn't it? So
absolutely, yeah. So the resident only gets impacted when the work is directly outside their window, and for all other work, the resident still gets their view that they've paid handsomely for, less disruption. All your privacy, security questions, daylight. Big thing for me. For the mental health side of things as well, which Steve could probably attribute. The debris netting reduces the daylight into the buildings by about 30%. So lights go on earlier, energy bills therefore increase, and it's just a very, very unpleasant, doesn't quite do it justice, place to live. And I think my question to anybody watching and listening, and I did this to a building safety forum a couple of years ago when I asked the question, who would want to live behind scaffolding? And when the answer is no one, and I then ask contractors, consultants, would you want to place your family behind there? Would you want to place any friends behind there? Would you want to even place people you didn't like behind scaffolding? The answer was still no. And hence the reason why I was constantly asking the question, so run me through why and how we have wrapped so many buildings in scaffold. And that's really, I have ideas as to why it's constantly happening, but I don't have the definitive answers. hence, invitations to forums like this as a way of asking, the industry, hopefully debunking some of the myths about mast climbers to make sure they are considered.
Let me do the obvious one. All right. I've never heard of mast climbers before I met you. I mean, have they only been around for a couple of years?
No, similar to Hamish's introduction, mast climbers have been in this country for circa 35 years. In growing in popularity over the last 10 years in particular, but to say that they've been in the industry for at least 15 years would be fair. BFT have got 1,600 machines. Rest of the market's probably got a further 2,000 split over another 4 or 5 suppliers. So there's capacity in the marketplace for these machines to be serving the need that we as the taxpayers and the residents need to have the buildings remediated. So this isn't a capacity issue. It is a little bit of a knowledge and awareness issue, but it's a habit issue. It's moving away from a default and understanding why when you take it back to this building now needs remediating, how are we going to do it? Whose decision is it? And those are the questions, those are the, of where we need to get to fully understand why the default is then always used. Because
I had a long history in telecoms, funny enough, in a previous life as a Cisco engineer. And the phrase there used to be, nobody ever got fired for choosing BT. And even though BT was often far more unreliable and more expensive, that was the default. You always picked it because no one ever got fired. And I think this is a similar situation. You've got a tick box, and the only one that's glaring in the office is scaffolding. Pick that, done. Next, and I guess we're inviting the industry to try and broaden their minds and see that there is an opportunity here to save time. But does it save money, Rob?
It should save huge amounts of money. So take Steve's building at 17 stories. I would expect the mast climber package to be over 60% cheaper than the scaffolding alternative. So again, it beggars belief when you think that most of these are being paid by either the CSSO, taxpayers' money under the cladding safety scheme, or via a developer pledge, which the developer is therefore hitting their bottom line. So you think they would have more of an interest and a say in getting the most cost-efficient solution together. However, what I've found over the last 12, 18 months is if the decision is left to a contractor, let's just say not all contractors have the moral compass set that the residents are at the centre of the problem and their needs need to be prioritised. Right. And when scaffolding is circa $1 million and mast climbers are circa 400,000 for a particular block, they will go for the more expensive because they actually then make more margin from that package. Right. And because the time it takes longer for the project, the total value of the project is where they make margin. So either way, there is a motivation challenge for some contractors. I'll make it clear, though, that is not all contractors. Some have very good moral compasses and have very good priorities, that the more projects that they can get done, even at lesser value, means that they will win more work from housing associations, local authorities, landlords, and therefore those are the ones that obviously, that I support the work they're doing.
I can see the mast climbers there are on a brick building, is it?
Correct.
So it works on all surfaces?
Absolutely, whether it's rain swing cladding, EWI solutions or brick. We have mast climbers that can be set up for all sorts of different safe working loads. So, can take up to 5 ton. So if brick need to come off to then get at fire barriers behind it, absolutely mast climbers can be used in the same way as cladding, in the same way as glazing. So all of the trades from that element can and successfully do use mast climbers with lots of different variations and other solutions, such as Steve mentioned his balcony. Some of the worst projects I see are the fact that the fire remediation is only around the balcony area, and yet the building gets fully encapsulated because of this of an entry onto the balcony. it's a solution that now the mast climbers can provide of a set of steps to gain access to that balcony, to keep the disruption to the residents to an absolute minimum. So, there's solutions there. They are just either A, and I'll be optimistic at saying not very well known in the industry, or B, being deliberately ignored.
Yeah, but it seems to me that putting self-serving interest to one side, I think it might be, forgive me, laziness, that they don't want to explore an option that makes they have to think outside the box. And even though what was scaffolding, how many men do you, or how many people, sorry, not being sexist here, how many people does it require to set up a mast climber?
So we have a gang of 2 people who will install that mast climber to full height.
Right. And compare that with scaffolding, for instance.
Scaffolding, it will depend, but very roughly a gang of between 5 and 6 people typically to build out an elevation similar to the one out behind me.
Right. So
there's actually a few more in that for our one. About 7 or 8. The one thing, Rob, we had a massive argument and big fight over the netting. And one of the arguments they said was that you have to have netting to stop all the stuff falling, like bits of cladding falling off into, the path below, because there's active, there's a big path. So do you have sort of protection for, say, when they're hacking stuff off the wall to stop it falling down below?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mast climbers, as you can probably see to my right, are what I call fairly...
I'm going to maximize you in the screen again. Hang on, let's do that.
No, they're fairly standard setup, those mast climbers, i.e. they've just got the debris netting from a 1.1 meter handrail back to front with what we call almost the nappy underneath to catch things. But for a case like yours where EWI is being removed, that kind of polystyrene powdery substance, effectively how contractors who are advocates of mast climbers for that do it. We have a 2 meter debris netting handrail that goes round the platform, so back and sides, and we put a roof on the mast climber as well. And then we can do what we call a gap closure device for the area that you're working. So the point you're ripping that off, the only gap that is then between the mast climber and the facade is the gap in between the roof and the mast climber, because obviously that wouldn't touch the building. So could we give you a cast iron guarantee that absolutely nothing was going to come out? No, the world's not perfect. But could we turn around and say the solution will collect 95% of that material? Yes, especially with a careful trade who are not who are careful in the way they work.
Brilliant.
All right, great. So, Hamish, it seems to me that there is a solution out there to make sure that the residents of these places don't feel like, unbeknownst to them, they need to be cocooned, and yet not enough people are taking it on. It seems crazy to me.
But I think it's a very opportune time that Rob should actually sort of join us, because at this particular point in time, we've just gone through that massive sort of amount of heat, and apparently it's going to get warmer later on this summer. So whatever Steve and his colleagues, the residents there at Royal Artillery Quays, have just gone through, it's going to be, we should have some warmer weather for a marginally longer period. So it's going to become even more incumbent upon the poor souls in there to sort of do something about their mental health. But it does remind me, when I was a buyer, Unipart, I was a new products buyer, and whenever we had a new vehicle being produced by Rover, we needed to sort of reevaluate, do a bit of recost and all the rest of it. And I was very much aware of, because my job as a buyer was to minimize cost as much as possible. So I would go out there and I would actually negotiate and speak, and I would have to battle with my design engineers on occasions, because they say, no, we like such and such a company because we've always dealt with them.
Right.
And I said, well, yeah, but this particular company, I have researched it. They have worked with Honda in Japan. They know exactly what Honda require in Japan, and they can actually do it at 2/3 of the price. and they'd and they'd haw, and they'd say, we're doing this under duress. We don't want to go ahead and do it. And then all of a sudden they find, wow, it's cheaper. And therefore the company in itself is performing much, much better, much more effectively. And
but it's not just the economic issues here, is it? It's the combination of, as Rob mentioned, mental health support by not being wrapped up like a bloody kipper.
Well, there's so much we can actually look at this, and this should be a very, very big indication, not just to Greenwich, because we know what Greenwich are like. I don't know quite why Greenwich have decided to take this particular sort of route and even use the development fund, for example, or the developers fund to actually give half the population bicycles that they didn't particularly want or need, just to pick up some extra votes. But they actually sort of use that, whereas a little bit of brain power, they could have actually paid for those bikes out of the savings that are made out of the scaffolding loan, probably.
Oh my goodness!
And I think, what I'd like to add, and certainly to Stephen and other residents who are leading on their blocks that are up against probably very similar battles to what Steve is facing. The Code of Practice for the Remediation of Occupied Buildings, which was re-released by Homes England in December 25, that clearly states in it that contractors need to engage with their residents prior to any work starting, with the examples of how the works will be done, to give the residents chance to question, challenge, feedback. And I'm not expecting for a start that the residents should know better than the contractors, and the contractors should have explored all options. But part of that also clearly states that the contractor should have explored all possible alternatives to wrapping the building in scaffolding. Now,
the problem is, Rob, they don't engage. I mean, I think that, so they're basically saying that the dangerous panels, that the insurers are saying, yeah, you can enjoy your £6,000 a year service charge, mainly made up of high insurance. And the contractors are saying they don't really care, because this watered down remediation standard allows this material that is crucially banned on new buildings to stay on our fire shafts. Now, if they can't, answer a question, why is it banned on new buildings and why is it staying on ours? They don't even know what the product is of the panels. They don't know the fire performance test evidence to know the risk of leaving it on. So if they can't deal with that fundamental point on the panels, and also on the report saying there's internal defects that are so serious that they recommend prosecutions, and they're also glossing over that, and then the council says none of that evidence exists, even though we sent it to them. You can see how residents are totally screwed by these remediation, and this is happening all around the country. It's not just us. So I've been campaigning for a change in the law to basically make this happen, and we'll be back in the remediation bill. We've tabled 8 times in the House of Lords with the Earl of Lytton, and we'll be back again to basically change the PAS standard, to eliminate it basically and replace it with the Building Safety Act definition of building safety risk, because it's unacceptable that we're having to argue this much. And we've just raised £5,000 for a fire report to try and get these panels off. So, it's the contractors are part of the problem, I'm afraid. They're allowing great evil to happen, and they're doing it silently and hiding behind a fire engineer. And the fire engineer is meant to be independent and not employed by the builders. Well, when I wrote to him asking for explanations to all of this dodgy stuff in the fire risk assessment report he put together, he said, oh, you'll have to get permission from my client Barratt Homes. I was like, I don't think you're meant to say that. You're meant to say you're working for the building owners and you're independent of the Barratt, because Barratt will not want all of this stuff to come off.
Of course they don't.
And he said, oh, no, I meant the building owners. And I was like, right, thanks for writing the email. And so this is what we've got. You've got fire engineers totally compromised by the developers, councils denying evidence to exist to help the developers out, so we can't go to court and get a remediation order. And you've got the injunction route under the Building Act 1984 shafted by councils denying the evidence, so we can't then use that evidence in the court. It's absolute, and then on top of that, we've got a 2-year remediation with all the problems of a remediation under the heat at the moment as well, only to find out all the stuff is staying on and we're going to have to do it all again. So, we've got
it's tragic.
we're totally shafted, and yet the government are trying to speed these substandard remediations up all around the country. It's an utter disgrace. It's unsafe. It's condemning people to permanently high insurance, and we need to change this as a matter of.
It's of course ironic that in the very place where all those XPS panels have been stuck on is the shaft. That's you are completely shafted, literally and metaphorically. All right, thank you very much, Steve, for that ridiculous point report there. And Rob,
Rob, I definitely think it should be taken forward. I mean, I just, from my experience of dealing with Barratt, and I've had quite a lot of meetings, they do anything to basically get out of, doing anything with their suppliers. They got their special agreements, they got their friends, and the scaffolding, we had a big argument on the scaffolding, and it was they had to use their favorite scaffolding person, and then it was up to them if we had the netting. And we were going to have something even worse, this monoflex, which was black. And the
monoflex, black.
Yeah, it's a black sort of material, but at least we didn't have that. But we got into the whole sort of part of Barratt's preferred contractor and their preferred method, and it was all very murky. And they've got their friends, they got their mates, and it's what those mates want that seems to. And I think they do it at a good price, and they'll help each other out, and it's breaking down. And that's why we've got all these defects staying on the building, because we found that the fire engineer that did the original remediation plan just wanted to leave they wanted to leave most of the EPS, which is unlawfully installed. It was legal, but it was unlawfully installed. They wanted to leave it on the building, and that was again someone working for Barratt. And they presented this appalling plan of only taking the dangerous EPS off the front of the building and leaving the other 3 elevations with it on. But so luckily, we managed to.
Once again, our favourite master builder marking his own homework. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, I think that there's some tremendous revelations there from Bob to indicate what a difference it can be made, and the total lack of vision or even sort of comprehension that the builders, the developers have demonstrated in what could have been done relative to these particular sort of properties. We've still got the insecurity, we've still got the fire risk, and we've still got them putting up with these appalling conditions that using Rob's solution to these. So I do hope there's a lot of people listening in, not just Royal Artillery, not just Greenwich Council, but a number of other people to look at what this. We didn't give Rob enough time, actually. We'll have to get Rob on one of our.
I'm sorry, Rob. We'll have to have you back again.
Not a problem.
Do you give him a bit more of a, because we're trying to pull everything together here, and there's a lot of information to take on board. But as an introduction, anybody who hasn't seen this particular scenario before and the comparison, it looks absolutely superb when you actually see the contrast between what there is behind Rob and that particular kind of solution.
Now, if you want to know more about this, I'm going to put up on the screen there. That's a really good place to start. Do look up Rob Munns because he has an active LinkedIn presence, and we'll be talking more and more about these things. I'm certain of it. And if you want to learn more about how this is related to our artillery keys, we will be having Rob Munns back again fairly soon to talk still further. But until then, thank you so much, all of you, for watching, for staying with us. I saw there's a big influx halfway through, so good. Maybe Greenwich Council on there. And by the way, I want to extend our unreserved and welcoming hand towards people, anyone in Greenwich Council, anyone in the Labour Party, anyone who wants to come on the show to explain their position. I promise you won't be lambasted. It won't be a have I got news for you scenario. We'll be there to listen, and we just want to hear your side, why you're prepared to put up with this situation, which has left it that many years after what was unlawfully put in place, it's still there. No fire doors, XPS panels on the fire shaft. I would love to hear your explanation. Please do come on the show. I'm extending the hand of friendship all the way through the airways. But until next time, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and in these troubled times, please try and look after your mental health. Until next week, have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye now.
Take care all.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll promise you the moon, but their word always fails. They'll tear down